All right, welcome back. It's Tom Storey here. I'm very excited to have Kyle with me today. So Kyle's from Victoria, so Vancouver Island. We work in different markets, and we kind of wanted to film a video today to compare what's happening in our respective markets. Price point, why people are buying. Is it more expensive in the core to the suburbs?
Totally.
So thank you for being here with me today.
Yeah, thanks Tom. Thanks so much for having me, and excited. I got a chance to come out to Toronto, and so why don't we connect and chat about our markets? And I think Victoria, Toronto, Vancouver were kind of the three more costly markets. And so what's causing that demand, and what's causing those prices to be more attractive for certain people?
So one thing that I've noticed in our marketplace is that affordability is everything, right?
Yeah.
So with the stress test that came in beginning of 2018, and when you go back to 2017 moving forward, we've had 5 rate hikes from the Bank of Canada. So money costs more to borrow, and you're getting approved for less. So in your marketplace, what's the price range or property type that's still doing really, really well?
Yeah, so Victoria, of course, we're on the southern tip of Vancouver Island, so land availability is very tough.
Right.
So when we talk about our core, which is our most popular areas, that's around the Parliament buildings, close to the ocean, lots of great walkability. Our core single-family home price for benchmark is around $875,000.
Okay.
So when we talk about things like the stress test, it had a major effect on our market, right? When people are losing that 20% of their purchasing power, it has a big effect. So homes with suites now are a lot more popular.
Right.
So generally what we're seeing for single-family homes under $900,000 with a suite are still probably the sweet spot right now.
Right.
I've just had some clients, we just had multiple offers last week, we were successful, but that's where we're seeing the demand. That stress test has pushed people into needing that income helper.
Yep.
Or what we're seeing is people have been pushed down the property ladder, so that's kind of what we call stratas, which are homeowner association type properties, attached townhomes and condominiums.
Yep.
A lot more attractive there as well. So Victoria is a very diversified economy, right? We're a government town, we're a military town, retirement lifestyle, right? We're the place in Canada that I can always say it doesn't snow every year. So a lot of Toronto people, right? I work with a lot of great people from Ontario. So what we're seeing is that people are really wanting those condos that are walkable. Right. But what it's done is condos kind of, I say, under $600,000 if it's a 2-bedroom, or if it's a 1-bedroom kind of under $450. That's where we're still seeing a lot of demand, especially ones with rental options and pent options and stuff like that.
So for a lot of my clients that may be watching that are buying condos in Toronto, the way that we look and sell condos is price per square foot.
Of course.
So the core of the city, it's amazing what's happened over the past 5 years. I remember, 5 years ago we went to a condo launch and they wanted $650 a square foot. We were kind of laughing, being like, they think they're going to get $650, and now that same building's selling for $1,100 per square foot. 5 years later, anything resale in a good area of Toronto in the core is getting $900 to $1,000.
Yeah.
Where's your pricing like for condos in your market?
Yeah, so I would say our average, probably a building built in 2000 or newer, you're probably going to be in that 650 to 800 square foot range for a good building. That will be rentable, steel and concrete. Now, of course, Victoria, we're not as high as Toronto, so we do get a mix of wood frame buildings. So we do have some new wood frame construction that can go up to 6 stories. You might get something in that's more closer to 600 square feet of range in that property, but generally your newer construction resale is going to be in that 650 to 800 range.
Gotcha.
But we're seeing some newer, more luxury properties starting to hit that $1,000 mark. And actually, we had a brand new building right downtown in the Inner Harbor called Customs House. Highest price per square foot, $2,000 a foot.
Crazy.
For some of the sub-penthouses and penthouses. Now, that was crazy to us. But, we get a lot of people coming from Vancouver now, people from Toronto as well, that for a special piece of property, they're willing to pay some of those numbers because they're used to them in places like this.
Yeah, willing to pay that premium, right? Because for a long time in our market, Yorkville, you could maybe see $1,500 to $2,000 a square foot. Now we're seeing these new construction buildings being put up on King Street, and they're starting at $1,600 a square foot and going up from there. And then, if you want parking, well, you got to pay another $90,000 for that.
So we're $50,000 to stall in Victoria now.
So for new construction in Toronto, for the core of the city at least, you're 75 to 100 grand. It's kind of crazy when your parking spot is going to cost more than the car that you're putting in it, right?
Right, exactly. I know, and that's where some people right now, walkability is becoming so important, and people starting to realize that single-family home might not be the goal that they want because of price points and affordability, and really looking at the condo market now as a long-term option for housing. So
government intervention, obviously it's a super hot topic for everybody watching. I always used to joke with people and say, it seems that Ontario copies BC about 6 months to a year later, whether it's the foreign buyer tax or things like that. However, there are a few things in place in your marketplace that we don't have here. And it's, rules with Airbnb, the vacancy tax. So if you could just expand on that, and what's limiting your market today that wasn't there 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, no, great point. And so I was, I served as president of the Victoria Real Estate Board last year, and I'm still in a government relations role as past president. So very involved in this over the last few years. So you're right. So the foreign buyer tax, which used to be 15% in Vancouver, that was increased to 20%, and that was expanded out to the other major markets in BC.
Right.
So now in southern Vancouver Island, Nanaimo, the rest of the Fraser Valley, and Kelowna, the major market there, we have a 20% foreign buyer tax. So that's expanded. The thing about Victoria is we've never been a huge foreign market.
Right.
When the government started keeping stats of this a few years ago, we've never really been higher than 6%. And we've always been more around that 3%. And that's mostly been Americans, right? I always tell people I can almost throw a rock and hit the United States from where we are. So a lot of Americans come up, and it's because we're a home port for cruise ships. And so a lot of Americans get off the cruise ships, they fall in love with Victoria. It's that nice, friendly place that they want to come. The other big one you mentioned, though, of course, is the speculation and vacancy tax. So this was an interesting one brought out by the new government, the NDP, that came in at the end of 2017. And this was really what they felt there was a lot of empty homes not being used, and that was causing part of the affordability crunch and the rental vacancy crunch, because a lot of Victoria, Vancouver was less than 1% for rental vacancies for multiple years. So we started seeing rents going up quite a bit. So there were some rent control changes as well. But the speculation and vacancy tax, the way it works is if you own a secondary property in Nanaimo, Victoria, most of the Lower Mainland, or Kelowna. If you own a secondary property, your primary residence is elsewhere in BC, Canada, or other countries, you don't rent out that property for 6 months of the year. Minimum 30 days. So Airbnb doesn't count. We'll talk about that after. But you need to rent out your property 6 months of the year to get an exemption.
And now, correct me if I'm wrong on this. They're assuming that you're not renting it out 6 months of the year because you have to file paperwork just to show them that you are, correct?
Exactly, yeah. So there was a declaration that came out. So if you own a secondary property and it's a full-time rental, you're good. You're good. Right? You fill out the exemption form, you give them some details of your tenancy agreement, and you're good.
And this form is every year you have to fill it out?
Every year.
And if you forget it, you're going to get charged.
You pay the tax.
And so the tax is?
It's a negative billing situation where if you don't fill out your paperwork and prove that you're not doing it, you pay. So very interesting times. We're waiting to see what the final results of this, how much of the tax is actually collected. The government wasn't very forthright in releasing some of the stats of what they were projecting for this. The challenging part is we have people who spend 8 to 9 months of the year in Victoria, but they might have their primary residence in Calgary because maybe they're still working a bit in oil and gas or one of those other industries. They do a lot for the community, yet because they don't rent out their home, they don't get that exemption. So it's been a little bit challenging, but overall we think this government is coming in trying to make some new policies to hopefully help with the affordability challenges. But I think we're really trying to get them to push on the supply side. I think you talk about that a lot in your videos as well, especially on the rental side. There wasn't a lot of purpose-built rental happening in Victoria for almost 30 years. Because they just built a lot of condos that made a lot more sense. So we've really been pushing the government to focus on that. But talking about rentals again, going to Airbnb. So in the city of Victoria, we had legal Airbnb zoning, which was called transient zoning. So they brought that in about 1999 when the economy was struggling, the dot-com thing had happened, everything like that, and they wanted to spur on tourism. And there was a lot of old heritage buildings in downtown Victoria that were underutilized, kind of going derelict. So what they did was they brought in this progressive zoning, and developers started coming in and rehabilitating these buildings. They didn't knock them down, they restored them. So our Chinatown is thriving right now. These really cool old parts of Old Town are thriving because developers went in, built some funky loft-style condos, and were able to market them in a better way because you could rent out daily and weekly. So things have gone great.
Yeah.
So there was about 18 to 20 buildings, but the city of Victoria a year and a half ago took away that zoning.
Oh, interesting. So for the entire city.
So there's no longer transient zoning allowed anymore.
Wow.
Now those people that had buildings had Airbnb units. They were grandfathered in.
Gotcha.
But there's business licenses. So if you are if you live in your principal residence and you go away for the weekends, and you want to rent it on Airbnb, no problem. It's a $150 business license for the year.
Gotcha.
If you're an investor and you run maybe 2 or 3 different units, it's $1,500 per unit.
Per unit per year.
Per year.
Right.
Exactly. So, with that, the hotel industries were kind of battling on it a little bit too. It was an interesting kind of local dynamics. Now, the province of BC is looking at different regulations as well, different taxation methods around Airbnb, or looking at how the Residential Tenancy Act works around Airbnb too. So, it's a very interesting time right now. Again, I think the Airbnb market, like I said, it was only about 18 to 20 buildings in Victoria.
Gotcha.
Such a small percentage of all the condo buildings that are out there. So I think, again, they're going after a very small part of the market to hope that it's going to solve a larger issue. So, it's been interesting. I know you guys have had a lot of stuff come in as well.
Yeah.
And, BC generally is there. I think the Vancouver effect is so real in BC as well. You are the Toronto effect.
Sure, yeah.
But in Vancouver, of course, we had so many people migrating over to Victoria, markets like Kelowna as well, because the house prices in Vancouver got so high. So a lot of young families. So Victoria's gotten a lot younger in the last 3 or 4 years, which I love.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends have moved back from Vancouver because they want to start families. And so even with those benchmark prices at $875 in the core, you talk about a market like Vancouver, which is still 1.3, 1.4 for a single family detached. Victoria's still a lot more a lot better market for them to get into. And with technology now, people are living in Victoria and still working in Vancouver.
Interesting.
Which has been amazing.
So one thing that I noticed, actually, when we talk about Vancouver, so a few months ago, someone was asking me, is Vancouver still way more expensive than Toronto?
Yeah.
I went, okay, let's check out, Vancouver proper.
Yeah.
And I think I found 7 homes under $1 million. And I did that same search in Toronto proper, and I found 700 homes under $1 million. And you're saying your benchmark price in your area is under 9, or right around 9.
Yeah.
So it's still in that range where you don't have to put 20% down to buy a property. It's more affordable. So if we're talking to our clients or anyone else in the industry that just wants advice on, okay, moving forward, we can complain about all the regulations. It is what it is, right? So we have to move forward. We have to understand, and we have to work around it. Where the dream of buying your first home as a detached property, it's no longer there like it used to be before. And something that I talk about all the time is you have to work your way up the property ladder.
Of course.
So a lot of my clients have started with the condos, and they're moving up to the townhomes or the semi-detached, or I think you call them duplexes.
Strata duplexes.
Yeah. So attached homes. Where we're seeing that happen a lot, but it has to be very strategic.
Completely.
So if you sit on the sidelines and wait, and one thing, markets change. They go through cycles.
Of course.
When you sell and buy, you're also typically doing it in the same cycle.
Of course.
Right? So it's relative.
You're trading across in the same market, I always say.
So, maybe in 2017 I could have sold a home in Toronto for 1.5. Now it's worth 1.3. But the one they wanted to buy that was 2 is now worth 1.6.
Yeah.
So everything's relative, right? So
completely.
The 3 things I always look at, market fundamentals, and myself as a real estate investor, is, okay, immigration and population.
Yeah.
How many people are coming in? What's the demand going to be? Interest rates, obviously huge.
Yeah.
It looks like Bank of Canada's kind of taking their foot off
the gas
pedal, where it might even go
decreases.
Right.
Yeah.
which if you had told me that end of last year, I would have never believed it, right? And then you look at unemployment rate. In our city right now, unemployment's at a 40-year low, and all the big businesses are actually coming from the suburbs into the core of the city. They're coming back. So the fundamentals are strong moving forward. And I think it's pretty similar across Canada, at least in our markets.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. So if I'm a buyer and I don't own a property, but I want that dream house, do I wait? Do I get in small and work my way up?
No, I think you got to get in now. I think you nailed it on those 3 fundamentals, and those are the same conversations I have. Victoria's net migration has doubled in the last 5 years.
Right.
So Victoria, because we were a retirement town, a lot of younger people would go to university and they leave. We have a huge tech sector right now. It's kind of a startup little tech mecca. So we now have industries with finance and tech really taking off for 25 to 45-year-olds to stay in Victoria.
Oh.
So with people staying and now this migration coming from Vancouver as well, we're at about 4,000 to 5,000 people moving to Victoria every year, where it used to be about 2,000. Because the young people used to have
to leave. And has inventory gone up? Or is there less? Right.
No, inventory's gone up in the last about 12 months because demand has slowed down a little bit.
Yep.
But that has been for factors like the stress test, people waiting on the sidelines because of all these new policies that have come into effect. And so now, our last May, we were 12% higher sales May 2019 versus May 2018. I did a few media interviews and they said, well, what's going on? Is the market about to take off again? I said, well, Victoria properties have always been in demand.
Right.
Right now that the policies have kind of settled out, people are adjusted to the stress test. People want to get in. And like I said, those markets, because media sometimes will look at average prices, which say they're coming down a little bit, but that's really our high end of the market. So yeah, if you're 1.5 and higher, yes, you have to be a lot more price conscious. But those affordable detached properties or those affordable condominiums are still going, sometimes in multiple offers.
Right.
And benchmark prices are actually increasing at those lower, more affordable price points. So if you're a local government worker and a nurse, you're still in a very competitive market. So you might look and see that, the market's actually cooling off. Well, your entry point is actually competitive and actually getting more expensive.
Right.
And so, like you said, the property ladder, I'm going into my 10th year now. The clients who listened to me 9-10 years ago are now in their single family home.
Yeah.
The ones that said, no, I'm going to rent. Oh, I've got cheap rent. I'm going to stay in this. Maybe spent their discretionary spending on silly things, and not thinking about that because, what is a home? It's forced savings at the same time. Even if you have anything, your principal residence is forced savings. So those people that bought that small condominium, maybe just on the outskirts of downtown, they've been able to sell that, get into a semi-detached, and now they're in a single family home and their friends are jealous of them. But it's because they sacrificed in the beginning and they made that jump in. And so that's where I've really been showing people is you got to bite the bullet and jump in. And even if those markets adjust as you go, you always need a roof over your head. And a market like Victoria, like I said, land constraints are huge. We're only going to see more population pushing into those core areas. So I think you got to get in now. The interest rates coming down will be an interesting change as things move forward. But I always tell people, now is the best time to get in because the affordable end of the Victoria market will always stay very strong.
I've noticed in our market, since rent control came into place in April of 2017, rent has actually gone up almost 14%, starting rent prices, because if you're in rent control, why would you ever move? Of course. And I have some clients calling me saying, hey, I want a new rental. I'm saying, no, just stay where you are until you're ready to buy.
Yeah.
But you can look at rent, and if you're in a cheap rent situation right now, but it's still 100% interest. So I have no issue with people renting. It's a lifestyle choice, right? You just have to look at, have your 5-10 year plan at where you want to be.
Yeah.
And the way mortgages are structured now, if you buy that condo or that townhouse, where your monthly fees are going to be higher than you're currently renting, but even the way mortgages are structured now, 45% is going to principal.
Yeah.
That's money in your pocket that's building equity. And worst case scenario, let's say prices don't go up. They just, you're still paying off your equity every single month.
It's the opportunity cost that people don't factor in. They just look at that basic, what's it coming out of my pocket and what's going in potentially every month. They don't look at the long-term wealth building that they're doing. And like I said, the clients that I've met with that took my advice, they're so thankful now, especially because when the market does go up, as our markets generally do, right? We've had, some of our condo markets are up 50% from 2016 to 2018. They thank me, right? Thank you so much for getting me into this. And even when the market was flat, those other areas, but you're building equity, and it creates so many opportunities that you don't normally have. And it's such an amazing feeling with home ownership. And in a city like Victoria, where it's just such a beautiful place to be, it's so great that you have your own piece of home ownership there.
I kind of look at owning property as leverage. So find me something else in life that you can use, enjoy, build memories, and then sell for more money. And then at that same time, you're leveraging the bank's money. So if you take actually, we'll talk about long term. If you look at Toronto long term, our 40-year, we had a crash in the early 90s. 2008, everyone got scared. Prices didn't go down. Sales stopped. And then the second half of 2017, after fair housing. So we've had a crash and 2 minor corrections.
Yep.
Throughout that entire period, you average out all the good and all the bad, it's 6.57%.
Yeah.
So 7% a year on your, not only your money, but the money you're borrowing from the bank. And rates right now are like just over 3.5%.
Yeah.
Even some are getting lower than that right now. So you're leveraging your money and your time, and you have to live somewhere, right?
Exactly.
So owning the roof over your head is nice, and it gives you opportunity moving forward.
Completely. And you know, I don't have the stats in front of me. You're the stats nerd, right?
Yeah.
But for sure. And Victoria's been the same thing. And I always tell people the stable economy of Victoria: government town, military town, tech, retirement, lifestyle, tourism. So again, Victoria, yeah, that, you know, one major correction, you know, looking at that chart just in my mind, there's been those few small corrections, but most of the time we've had any corrections in Victoria has been policy based.
Sure.
Right? It was, you know, it was the tightening up of amortization from 2010, 11, 12, 13, and all that did was build up a pent up demand that hit us in 2015 and 2016. And talking about leveraging the bank's money, and I know people get a little nervous with interest rates going up a quarter point, 1 point. You and I are too young to remember the 80s, but I work with a lot of clients, you know, that are baby boomers that they remember buying homes when they thought 14%, 15%. So sometimes when people talk about affordability and, oh, things were so much cheaper back then, I sometimes show them, here's your $100,000 property with 19% interest.
Right.
And look at what your income would have been back then. So sometimes I have to give history lessons to people that a market can look good on paper sometimes when they look at the price of a house, but what's your opportunity cost and your servicing costs for what was available back then. So even with people worried about interest rates, look at it in the long-term picture of what you're doing. Like I said, the amount that you're about to leverage and just what it creates for you long-term.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Okay, so I think we'll maybe wrap it up here. People that want to find you online, how do they find you?
You can find me online with the Prime Real Estate team in Victoria, British Columbia. You can find us at primeteam.ca, or you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, all those fun things. I do a lot of videos just like yourself. I think that's what we've connected in the beginning. So find me online, Kyle Kerr, anywhere you want to go. Awesome.
If you want to check out more from the Storey team, Instagram at the Storey team, YouTube, Facebook, it's all the Storey team. You'll find us.
There we go.
Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions about what we talked about, I know we talked and discussed a lot of different
covered a lot of topics today.
Post them below. We'll be in the comments section. We'll answer them. We look forward to hearing from you, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, you too.
Okay, cheers.